Hello everyone, let us do this new moon in Gemini video. First and foremost, thank you for your patience. You all know, well, those of you who've been watching this channel for a while know that I do my new moon videos after the new moon. So it might feel idiosyncratic to some, it doesn't feel idiosyncratic to me, but you know, sometimes we get sort of fixated and stubborn about certain things. So irrespective, here we are. It's a complex. It's taken me a while to process the energies of the new moon today, I will be honest with you, and I'm kind of surprised and a little stunned by how a lot of the astrology of the year through this process has come into focus. And I'm excited to share all this information with you. I'm wondering how I'm going to be able to share everything in a way that is coherent, but I will. And at around the 20-25 minute mark, I'm going to end this video. I don't like my videos to go longer than that. And I'll carry on and do a part 2 or part 3 as is needed. Let's start where we usually start with new moons. So it is a new moon after 2 eclipses. It is a new moon. Not only have we had May, it's been a hell of a month, right? Because we've had 2 eclipses that we have come through and a Mercury retrograde for much of May, from May the 10th to June the 3rd. This new moon that occurs today is one of the rare unaspected lunations. In other words, the new moon in and of itself does not really make a strong transit to any other planet in the sky, but it has some interesting characteristics that go along with it. It is a new moon in Gemini, and the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is still retrograde. In fact, it is on May the 30th today, retrograde enough that it is slowing down, because in 4 days' time it's going to go direct. And those of you who follow Mercury retrogrades know that it's when Mercury is stationary, or when Mercury looks stationary to us, either when it's just about to go retrograde or when it's about to go direct, as it's going to be on June the 3rd. Now, I have no idea how this is going to look when you're watching this, whether it's going to be forward or backward. Bottom line is, Mercury goes direct June the 3rd or 4th, and we're headed there. And right about this time, over the next few days, is when we're going to feel the Mercury scramble with a certain amount of intensity once again, because when the planet of thinking and transactions and cognition and communication is going to be at a standstill, its powers are not going to be flowing in any direction with a great deal of facility. So classic things such as delays, technology issues, problems, travel issues, lost baggage, not reading the time of departure correctly, communication issues with customer service, transaction issues on technology, commute issues, whether you're using a bus or your own car or Uber or whatever it is that you're doing. All those kind of Mercury-related items, mail taking longer to get to you, you know, craziness with communication. Those kind of mundane issues will crop up again as this week goes on, and it will likely be a little bit confusing, because we have this rather important new moon today that happened at about 4:30 a.m. earlier today. I'm doing this at 7:06 p.m., so already about 12 hours later. We had this important new moon, but the very first thing I want to say about this new moon is it is important, and I'll explain why in a second. But just know that till about June the 6th, so for about another week or so, you're still wrapping up old energies. And I'm largely saying this because Mercury is going to go direct on June the 3rd. And Mercury will go direct on June the 3rd, but let's give Mercury 3 or 4 days till it starts to gather some momentum at least and starts to move forward. So that takes us to Monday, about June the 6th. I would imagine that it's about by Monday when we'll be able to dust ourselves off and really start to move forward in a way that I'm going to describe shortly. Now, it is a new moon day, so it will not surprise me at all if the last 48 hours, and even if some time after the new moon, has been exhausted, or people tend to sleep more whenever it is that you know, for the 42. Remember what I've said to you before with new moons and full moons. After a new moon, it's like the energetic wave is headed to a shore and it gathers momentum. At the time of the full moon, it crashes on the shore, it reaches some sort of energetic peak, and then after a full moon, the wave starts to recede. So when we're talking just before a new moon, we have a wave, our energy has pulled back, and I would actually think of it, things sort of accelerating and increasing as we get to a full moon, and then decreasing as we get to the next new moon. It's a 28-day cycle. And before the new moon, the wave has pulled back from the shore. The energy is much smaller, much more retreated, much more reflective, much more exhausted, much more depressed. And so not unusual before a new moon, and even for about 12-13 hours after a new moon, to just be in a space, not unusual to feel exhausted and hopeless and low. Now, you could still be busy, but at the end of the day, it might be just that much more for trudge, or things might be that much more reflective. Now, the new moon is now over 12 hours behind us, and it will slowly start to gather momentum. My own day has kind of reflected this energy. I'm finally doing this video, for example. I can certainly tell what this flow is like, but then I pay attention to this energetic event more than just about any other energetic event. Where's the moon as it's transiting in my chart? Anyway, so that aspect of the new moon remains unchanged. It's also nice to finally have a new moon that can act as a bit of a cleanser after the intensity of the eclipses. As I said, and I'll repeat it once again, we may very much find that we're continuing to deal with this new moon. There really is an opportunity. Some of the non-personal planets like Jupiter and Saturn are going to go retrograde relatively shortly. Saturn in a few days' time. Jupiter retrogrades, I think, affect us more directly. With Saturn retrograde, Pluto retrograde, Neptune, Uranus retrograde, I don't necessarily... The planets move so slowly that, I just kind of let them do their thing. The bottom line is the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, now, after June the 3rd, once Mercury goes direct, are going to be forward-moving till September the 10th, when Mercury goes retrograde. So if you want to think about it as though from June the 6th to September the 6th, now we have a certain type of forward movement that's going to make its way available to us, then you're welcome to think that way. And I would say that still, even though we've had a new moon today, use this coming week till June the 6th to tie up loose ends and finish up what is wanting to be finished up, even if you're, and line up your ducks in the appropriate rows, so that then starting next Monday, starting June the 6th, you can start to, kind of send them out in the world and open the gates. That's how it's going to feel. It's going to be a little different than most new moons, where you really feel that within 24, 48 hours of a full moon, things are starting to move ahead, and they will, but the kind of momentum that you're probably looking to build, think about inaugurating and starting things after June the 6th, and use this week to continue to prepare and tie up what needs to be tied up, and be prepared for Mercury retrograde issues. Now, one thing when it comes to the closing time of Mercury retrograde, and I'm going to do a separate video on Mercury going direct, but just pay attention to, as this week progresses, how things that came up around May the 10th, when Mercury went retrograde, and even around the eclipse 5 or 6 days later, come back around to be tied up in some way. And the tying up does not have to be negative. It could just be, remember what I always say, when planets, especially personal planets, have direct energies and actions and things move forward, and then especially when Mercury goes retrograde, it's as if we've been moving forward in a way where something is in our blind spot. And we're moving forward based on what we know. And then when Mercury retrograde happens, the most helpful aspect of this transit, frustrating but helpful, is that it puts the brakes on something so that you can catch up to and become aware of something that you really need to take into account once Mercury starts to move forward again, so that you don't. That's the best way to look at this energy. So one of the things I would encourage you to do as you start to prepare to move forward, not only after this new moon today, but especially after June the 6th, is to look back over the next 3 weeks or so since May the 10th and really see what came up around May the 10th, what's going to come again this week, what came up around the time of the lunar eclipse in Scorpio on May the 15th, 16th, and just take stock of what has come up that has been different to, in addition to, what you thought and how you thought things were moving forward prior to that time. What have you learned over the last 3 weeks that if you really were to put the frustration and the irritation aside around how it got brought up, recalibration, my friends, recalibration. You could just call it calibration, but I'll call it recalibration. We just kind of need to get clear on what is going on and what is not going on, so that as we move forward, we have taken into account what we did not know prior to May the 10th and are modifying our behaviors and our actions and our project plans accordingly. Okay, so I would certainly look at that. Now, new moon in Gemini, ruled by a retrograde Mercury. It would not surprise me if between now and June the 28th, which is when we have our next new moon in Cancer, 28 days from now, if we are still processing and acting on, after June the 6th, the energy and the activities and the actions are going to be a lot more forward moving. We're not going to be finishing up past work necessarily, particularly past work associated with the last Mercury retrograde cycle from much of January and early February. So whatever those finishing touches are will likely get done during the course of this week, and after June the 6th, we start to move forward again. But would not surprise me if this lunation period till June the 28th, to some extent, still has this dealing with kind of past issues feel. The reason why preparing for this particular new moon in Gemini video was so illuminating was I realized that when I looked at the transits just of the personal planets in Gemini, they take us into next year. So what do I mean by that? Mercury entered its shadow period for this retrograde in the sign of Taurus, where we had the solar eclipse on May the 1st. Around that time, hold on, I'll get you the exact date. Wasn't it May the 1st? April 30th. On April 30th. Bottom line, Mercury entered the shadow period in Taurus around April 26th. On April the 29th, it moved into Gemini. Okay? So from April the 29th to May the 23rd, April the 29th to May the 23rd, on May the 10th, it went retrograde. April 29th to May the 23rd, it was in Gemini. April 29th in Gemini, May the 10th retrograde, May the 23rd out of Gemini, back into Taurus. One of the things I'm going to ask you to think about and consider is where Taurus and Gemini sit in your chart, and what is the relationship between these two houses. Okay, so there's going to be a house in your chart that is occupied by the sign of Taurus. There's going to be a house in your chart that is occupied by the sign of Gemini. And this eclipse on April the 30th, which is an important eclipse and takes us into November, there's a tie-in between these two houses. So for example, if you're a Leo rising, it could be that there's a tie-in between career and friends and social circles and networks somehow. And there's a communication between the two. And the Taurus eclipse is relying a certain amount on the Gemini eclipse. There's a relationship between the two of them. If you are, if you are Scorpio rising, and you're dealing with issues related to marriage or divorce, for example, there's a correlation between the 7th house, the marriage house, and the shared resources house. What is the relationship between the two of them? Let me keep going. On May the 21st, the sun entered the sign of Gemini, as it does around this time every year, and it's going to be here till about June the 21st, and so we have the new moon today. Once the sun enters a sign, the moon meets up with it at least once in that sign, and that's when we have the new moon. Now, June the 23rd to July the 18th, Venus will be in Gemini, so the story will continue. We're going to have a certain amount of help. Whenever Venus enters a sign, she eases the path a certain amount. But August 20th, Mars enters Gemini and goes retrograde in Gemini. And Mars typically spends about 45 days in a sign, but Mars is going to be in Gemini from August the 20th to March the 25th of next year. There's a relationship with whatever is going on. So basically, if we look at this new moon and we look at the parade of the sun and the personal planets through the sign, and we look at the next 28 days and its relationship to these personal planets transits through Gemini, which I do, and which I know, which I will put money on, is the right, it works for me to interpret a chart that way. It's taken me a while to assimilate what I know in order to interpret things this way. The eclipses this year are in the sign of Taurus and Scorpio. But the sign of Gemini plays a really important role this year. It has a relationship to the sign of Taurus, where the eclipses of leaning into are occurring, by virtue of the fact that we had a Mercury, the eclipses and the month of May is basically tied by Mercury going direct during the time of the Taurus eclipse into Gemini, then going retrograde in Gemini, coming back into Taurus on May the 23rd, where it's going to be going direct in Taurus on June the 3rd, and then it's going to remain in Taurus till June the 13th. During this time in Taurus, Venus has now entered Taurus as well. So June, even though it is a Gemini new moon month, June is going to be a time when the Taurus part of your chart is going to start to see forward momentum and movement, and there's going to be a connection between what's going on in the sign of Taurus and the sign of Gemini. No question, in my mind. Whatever's going on in the sign of Gemini is complex, and there may be different entities based on where Gemini sits in your chart that are acting in ways that are moving you forward, and different entities where you have to draw the line that are involved in these themes that we've been talking about of leaning into, that push you forward, and places where you need to draw the line or draw some boundaries or protect yourself or deal with older energies. When it comes to the newer energies, it's between Taurus and Gemini. When it's the older energies, the sign of Gemini squares Pisces, where we have Neptune, and plays some role with the Scorpio eclipse of release on May the 15th as well. I know this video is going to be more interesting and attractive to astrology aficionados, so I'm going to apologize for that. You know, not all my videos are like this. Okay, I'm gonna expand on this more and more. So don't, if it just feels like I'm being, all this data that I'm processing and giving to you has actually made things go really clear for me. It may not feel like that for you right now. Mercury is still retrograde, getting ready to go direct, but we will continue to work on this in videos that I release over the next week and a half. Okay, so just bear with me. Just use this as a first video in a series of videos to come. New moon in Gemini today. The bottom line, the thing that I want you to take from this is it's an opportunity after June the 6th to take very important action. June the 6th to September the 6th are probably going to be the most pivotal months of this year. And I'm going to tell you, I think you know what you need to do. It's that important. It's those things that are backed up, and they have to do with the Pisces part of your chart and the Scorpio part of your chart and the Taurus part of your chart. With the Pisces and Scorpio part of the chart, it may very well have to do with protection and ending old energies. With the Taurus part of the chart, it is new energies. With the Taurus part of your chart and whatever's going on in Gemini, there's also support and a trine to Saturn in Aquarius. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm sure all this information is creating more confusion. Let me put it back. New moon in Gemini today. For the next week, prepare to close out this eclipse and especially the Mercury retrograde cycle. Okay? June the 6th, till June the 6th, line up everything that you feel like you need to get ready to start working on. And after June the 6th, all systems go till about September the 6th. Okay? Correlation between the Taurus part of your chart, very important right now, because the ruler of this new moon, Mercury retrograde, is in Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, who is in Taurus. So Venus is the ruler of the chart, strong, powerful, in her own sign of Taurus, where the April 30th eclipse took place. And we're waiting for Mercury to go direct so that we can see this April 30th eclipse gather more momentum as we head to that June 30th date, 2 months after the April 30th eclipse. Look at my April 30th eclipse video to make sense of this timeline, indeed the timeline that takes us to November the 8th. So Venus, planet of opportunities, relationship, money, the quality of our abundance, and the nature of abundance is related to or connected to the nature of our relationships. Venus, the planet of flow, abundance, harmony, relationships, will be much easier to access her energies after Mercury goes direct. So as energy returns, tie up loose ends and old issues by June the 6th. After June the 6th, all systems go. And whether it is the pursuit of goals related to the Taurus part of their chart, or the ending of old drama and the drawing of lines in the Pisces and Scorpio part of your chart, understand that the time between June the 6th and September the 6th is pivotal and extremely important for you to feel that by the time Mars comes into Gemini to go retrograde at the end of this year, after August the 20th, and by the time we start to deal with the 6-month Scorpio eclipse cycle at the end of this year, taking us into next year, that you find yourself on a stronger foundation. That is the biggest thing that this Gemini new moon is opening up for you. That after June the 6th, you take care of the pursuit of goals and the setting up of boundaries that you know have been pending and need to be done, so that by the time you get to the end of this year, you're in a much stronger place. All the other stuff that I talked about, I will continue to expand on over the next week and a half, so stay patient with me on that, because there's a lot of information to process there. I'm going to leave it at this. Thank you for your patience. Comment, like, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon if you haven't already so that you're notified when I do new videos, and I will be back in touch. Thank you for making it to this point. I know as Mercury is getting ready to go direct, it's going to be harder for the information to flow, even as I am trying to be somewhat cognitive. Irrespective, more to follow. Tie up loose ends over the next week. Mercury goes direct June the 3rd, gathers momentum by June the 6th. Open the gates, get the ducks to go out related to the pursuit of goals, as well as the setting up and the drawing of boundaries and closing up old items, pursuit of goals in the Taurus part of your chart, boundary setting and tying up loose ends in the Pisces part of your chart and the Scorpio part of your chart. All right,